Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. Today is, or this evening, it is June 14th, 2022, it's 8:26 p.m. We are going to start our UNIA-ACL Division 421 study group for this evening. We will be reading some of Philosophies and Opinions of Marcus Garvey. It'll be like, I don't have like a planned agenda, so it'll just be open reading. And if there's anything, any topics that anyone would like to review in particular, please let me know. But any questions or comments before we get started? Okay, as always, we start all of our meetings with the pledge to the red, black, and green. Let me pull that up. Okay. Greetings. Let's see. There's somebody on the conference line. Okay. I'm getting some feedback coming through from somebody's line. Is that my line? Okay, we'll get started in a second. I think the sound went away. Okay. Pull up the pledge. If you could, please repeat after me as we do our pledge to the red, black, and green flag. I commit my body, mind, and spirit.
I commit my body, mind, and spirit
to the protection, defense, and security.
To the protection, defense, and security.
Of the red, the black, and green.
Of the
red, black, and green.
I dedicate my life to the redemption of Mother Africa.
I dedicate my life
to the redemption of Mother Africa.
And the liberation of her scattered black children.
And the
liberation of her scattered black children.
I accept for myself and my descendants.
I accept for
myself and my descendants.
The teachings of universal African nationalism.
The teachings of universal African nationalism.
And I promise that our children will be instilled.
And I promise that our children will be instilled
with the purpose and knowledge of themselves as African people.
With the purpose and knowledge of the African people.
In order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail.
In order that the cause of our struggle will neither falter nor fail.
Until all black people are free and united.
Until all black people are
united.
Through one God.
Through one God.
One aim.
One aim.
One destiny.
One destiny.
Race first.
Race first.
Okay, we'll get right into it. I'll start out with the introduction, and then I'm going to jump to one of the sections. Okay. So again, this is Philosophies and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, starting at volume 1. So the introduction states, let me fix my screen. Stop sharing. Yeah. So the introduction states, Starts with a quote. It says, let me get a little bit of drink. All right, introduction starts with a quote. It says, quote, lying and stealing is the white man's game. For rights of God nor man, he has no shame. A practice of his throughout the world. At ale, great thunderbolts he has hurled. He has stolen everywhere, land and sea. A buccaneer and pirate he must be, killing all as he roams from place to place, leaving diseased mongrels disgrace. This edition of the philosophy and opinions of Marcus Garvey is printed and published for the first time in Jamaica. This particular 21st century edition arrives at a pivotal time in Jamaican history. In August 2014, the Jamaican government announced that the principles, philosophies, and opinions of the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey would be taught in our formal educational system. The question remains, how could we revere Marcus Garvey as the first national hero of the nation, yet take 50 years to mandate teaching his ideas to our citizens? This form of hypocrisy represents the neo-colonialism that governs Jamaica. It is therefore imperative that everyone read this introduction as a call to action, a call for full liberation that has yet to be realized for Africans in Jamaica and all over the world. It is not enough to read the ideas of Garvey, as you will read shortly, and sit back like our Black governments. Once you have received an ounce of his words and reflect upon the ensued conditions of Black peoples in various parts of the world, you must join the global fight to restore the greatness of Africa, to restore the greatness of African people without apology. For over 50 years, Garveyites, Rastafarians, and other Black nationalists from around the world made this call. However, the politicians and those who set themselves as leaders, though quoting and labeling themselves as Garveyites, did not educate the people of the true nature and spirit of Marcus Garvey. These so-called leaders were accustomed to imparting basic biographical information, such as when and where he was born, when he died, and that the headquarters of his organization was at Liberty Hall on 76 King Street. The revolutionary essence of Marcus Garvey was skirted around and in most cases avoided. Marcus Garvey states that, quote, education is the medium by which a people are prepared for the creation of their own civilization and the advancement and glory of their own race, end quote. The truth is that educational systems in Jamaica and many other former colonial territories prepare us to be good boys and good girls, eventually good subjects. During Garvey's lifetime, many persons, both Black and white, feared him. However, as they feared his ideas, principles, philosophies, and opinions of the objectives for which he fought, the cry for the principles of Garvey to be an intricate part of our daily lives went louder and louder in the Caribbean and throughout the world. To share the message of Garvey accurately, this must be done within the principle of African fundamentalism. As Marcus Garvey stated in the Negro World paper on December 6, 1930, says, quote, the creed of African fundamentalism must be maintained and protected every day. It is a philosophy that is to serve as a guide to the Negro peoples of the world. The other people do not live their lives by chance. They have a creed to guide them. Our race is the only one that has not done that. And so long as we continue to stack methods, so long we will be the slaves of the world. We must stop living by chance. We must plan our journey of life, our Black print. African fundamentalism seeks to emancipate the Negro from the thoughts of others who are encouraging him to act on their opinions and thoughts, end quote. A modern example of what Marcus Garvey is referring to is the manner in which many of our Black governments run their countries. They borrow excessively from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and other white multinational agencies that literally rule our lives. In Jamaica, the government tells teachers, nurses, workers, they cannot give them a raise of income higher than 5% because the International Monetary Fund stipulation. Based on these same stipulations, we cannot build more schools, hospitals, and craft centers because this is not part of our repayment plan. Every 3 months, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, decides whether we have passed their economic tests. They even keep a permanent representative stationed in Jamaica to assess our state records, to access our state records, ensuring that such modern enslavement continues. So although government representatives refer to Marcus Garvey in glowing terms, their policy of begging and cowering to the United States and other white countries, including allowing local and foreign business moguls free access to exploit the local workers, is contrary to the principles and objects of Garveyism. Our government and others completely ignore Garvey when he says, quote, "To emancipate yourselves from mental, spiritual, and economic slavery to the whites, you must accept something original, something racially your own. And that is what we want you, the Negroes, to accept, a philosophy entirely your own, serviceable to your actions, and cease imitating the thought of others," end quote. Today, we have Black governments that did not exist in the 1920s. However, these governments do not have Black minds. Their minds are in Europe. Sorry about that. Their minds are in Europe and America, meaning that both racial pride and self-reliance are lacking amongst Black peoples. All around the world, including Africa, Black people are increasingly using chemicals to whiten their skins to access socioeconomic power, being held property by white supremacy. We watch as our so-called Black government remains a part of the Commonwealth to collect pittances given to us in the form of aid by England. We continue to be a part of the organizations that remind us of all the murder under colonialization and enslavement. More specifically, the theft and exploitation of our land, which remains in the hands of the colonial descendants until this day. In the early 1920s, the UNIA-ACL headquarters in New York City and other locales created businesses, including restaurants, laundromats, grocery stores, factories, and printers. Garvey even considered starting a bank. The UNIA-ACL printery in New York was called the Beehive Printing Plant and was located at 2305 7th Avenue, where it did most of the printing for the Harlem community. So why have we not invested further energy into building institutions that center on our own interests like the UNIA-ACL proposed almost 100 years ago? For the past 40 years, I have been invited to several countries to speak and reason on the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey. The theme often asked is, how relevant is Garvey to today's reality? My answer is always the same, more relevant now than in the 1920s. We now have almost 100 years of history to guide our thinking. One of the main pillars of the Garvey thought is the theme of repatriation. Many of his detractors see this as one of his most ambitious goals, and also as one of his failures. I say no. Since we were taken out of Africa against our will under the most inhuman and barbaric conditions known to humanity, every African in the diaspora who wishes to return to Africa must be given the right to do so. It is our inalienable right, which we will never give up. The whites must understand that they can take us out of Africa, but they cannot take Africa out of us. The Blacks in Africa must also understand that we have a right to return, and we will be bringing with us vast skills, industrial knowledge, and investments to ensure the rise of Africa as a great civilization once again. For Garvey, a strong Africa led to a strong Black race globally. Throughout this volume, it will be revealed that there were serious exchanges of letters and correspondence between the UNIA-ACL and the Liberian government for the resettlement of millions of Black people from the Americas to the West Indies, from the Americas and West Indies to Liberia. Delegations were sent by the UNIA-ACL to meet with government ministers, including the president. Indeed, ships and numerous items of infrastructural development were sent to Liberia. The development of the Black Star Line Corporation in 1919 was designed as an important vehicle for the voluntary return of those African descendants who were stolen centuries earlier. However, before this grand scheme could materialize, the Liberian government, under pressure from the government of the United States and other corporate interests, such as the Firestone Rubber Company, withdrew its support, Despite the fact that when Garvey first communicated his plans for the development of Liberia, he was given full assurance that the UNIA-ACL would be accommodated by the Liberian government. Garvey was told that every facility would be made available to the UNIA-ACL to further their goal of uplifting Africa. They were also encouraged to pursue industrial, agricultural, and other business projects in the country. In this effort, the UNIA-ACL was given tremendous support by the great African patriot, James J. Dosen, who was the Chief Justice of Liberia and a strong UNIA-ACL member. As the future generations, we must build upon this legacy of repatriation and ensure that this long-standing vision of returning to Africa reaches fruition. That is, those of us who wish to return to the land of our mothers and fathers be allowed to do so and afforded every facility for rightful resettlement. In closing, I would like us to consider, why do we hang onto the skirt tails of England and other Western superpowers as our leaders asleep? Why use valuable resources to maintain the representative of the Queen of England, the Governor General, who does not look like us and whose foreparents murdered many of our ancestors? Why open our courts in the name of their royalty? It is not. Is this not contrary to independence? Why should our highest court, the Privy Council, be in the hands of white men, even when they insult us and make it clear that we are now a burden unto their judicial system? Isn't this a clear sign that we do not trust ourselves and prefer our enemy to make our laws? What Marcus Mosiah Garvey would advise is written in the subsequent pages. It is our responsibility to apply them again and again and again until we are free. And this was written by a brother named Miguel Lorne, February 2016. Anything on the introduction, on that introduction? Okay. I'll read the original preface by Amy Jacques Garvey. It's just 2 pages. It's a lot shorter than the other one. Make sure it's just 2 pages. Yeah. Preface. This volume is compiled from the speeches and articles delivered and written by Marcus Garvey from time to time. My purpose for compiling same primarily was not for publication, but rather to keep as a personal record of the opinions and sayings of my husband during his career as the leader of that portion of the human family known as the Negro race. However, on second thought, I decided to publish this volume in order to give the public an opportunity of studying and forming an opinion of him, not from inflated and misleading newspaper and magazine articles, but from expressions of thoughts enunciated by him in defense of his oppressed and struggling race, so that by his own words he may be judged, and Negroes the world over may be informed and inspired, for truth brought to light forces conviction, and a state of conviction inspires action. The history of contact between the white and black races for the last 300 years or more records only a series of pillages, wholesale murders, atrocious brutalities, industrial exploitation, disfranchisement of the one to the other, the strong against the weak. But the sun of evolution is gradually rising, shedding its light between the clouds of misery and oppression, and quickening and animating to racial consciousness and eventual national independence, Black men and women the world over. It is human, therefore, that few of us within the Negro race can comprehend this transcendent period. We all suffer in a more or less degree. We all feel this awkward spirit of true manhood and womanhood, but it's given to few the vision of leadership. It is an inspiration. It is a quality born in man. Therefore, in the course of leadership, it is natural that one should meet opposition because of ignorance, lack of knowledge, and sympathy of the opposition, and understanding fully the spirit of leadership. With the dawn of this new era, which precedes the day of national independence for Negroes, it is well for all members of the race to understand their leadership, know what its essentials, its principles are, and help it to attain its goals and liberate a race in the truest sense of the word. In chapter 1 of this volume, I have endeavored to place before my readers gems of expression convincing in their truths. Chapter 2 deals with the definition and expositions of various interest themes. Chapter 3 and 4 contain a collection of brief essays on subjects affecting world conditions generally and Negroes in particular. In chapter 5, I have reproduced what I consider 2 of the best speeches of my husband. It is my sincere hope and desire that this small volume will help to disseminate among the members of my race everywhere the true knowledge of their past history, the struggles and strivings of their present leadership, and the glorious future of national independence in a free and redeemed Africa, achieved through organized purpose and organized action. And that's written by Amy Jacques Garvey in New York City, February 23rd, 1923. All right, with that, I didn't know that she put 2 of what she felt was Garvey's best speeches in chapter 5. Chapter 5 actually has 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like 5 speeches, but we'll touch on the chapter 5 speeches in a second. Well, any questions or comments in regards to anything that's for the introductions?
No, I don't have anything, but I'm gonna have to disappear. I'm gonna stay online, but I need to disappear, take care of something for about 10, 15 minutes. So if you call on me, I won't hear.
Okay, no problem. Okay. First, let me see if we want to go through the epigrams. And we don't have to go through the epigrams. The only epigram or the stuff in chapter 1 that I wanted to touch on was something that we mentioned in Sunday's mass meeting. So one of the quotes that we talked about was disorganization. And it's here where Garvey says, the greatest weapon used against the Negro is disorganization. That comes out of this book in the introduction, or in chapter 1. Another statement or quote that he's got that I like, men who are in earnest are not afraid of consequences. So if we know what we're doing, why we're doing it, and we are earnest about what we're doing and why we're doing it, consequences really shouldn't matter, you know. Okay, so that's all I've got. Hungry men have no respect for law, authority, or human life. Goes back to our charity initiative. But Garvey he says something else about hungry. He says, like, when people are hungry, they don't really want to hear what you have to say. So we have an obligation to make sure our people are fed, because they won't want to hear what we have to say. And then hungry men, as Garvey says, have no respect for law, authority, or human life. So these individuals kind of become a danger to society, you know, just because of their need. Let me jump over to essay on government, page 19. Oh, this is short. So what Garvey says about government, Garvey says government is not infallible. Government is only an executive control, a centralized authority for the purpose of expressing the will of the people. Before you have a government, you must have the people. Without the people, there can be no government. The government must be, therefore, an expression of the will of the people. I thought that was more to it, but. Okay, let me see. Power. So poverty and power on the same page. Poverty, a hellish state to be in. It is no virtue, it is a crime. To be poor is to be hungry without possible hope for food, to be sick without hope of medicine, to be tired and sleepy without a place to lay one's head. To be naked without the hope of clothing, to be despised and comfortless. To be poor is to be a fit subject for crime and hell. So yeah. Statement. Yeah, hungry men have no respect for law, authority, and human life. And then he, in this section on poverty, he expands that. He continues, he says, the hungry man steals bread and thereby breaks the eighth commandment. By his state, he breaks all the laws of God and man and becomes an outcast. In thought and deed, he covets his neighbor's goods. Comfortless as he is, he seeks his neighbor's wife. To him, there is no other course but sin and death. That is the way of poverty. No one wants to be poor. So, you know, we can't really blame individuals unless it's like voluntary poverty, but we know a lot of the challenges that our people are dealing with and the circumstances that they're under. Power. Power is the only argument that satisfies man. Except the individual, the race, or the nation has power that is exclusive. It means that individual, race, or nation will be bound by the will of the other who possesses this great qualification. It is the physical and pugilistic power of hairy wills that makes white men afraid to fight him. It was the industrial and scientific power of the Teutonic race that kept it for years as dictator of the economic and scientific policies of Europe. It is the naval and political power of Great Britain that keeps her mistress of the seas. It is the commercial and financial power of the United States of America that makes her the greatest banker in the world. Hence, it is advisable for the Negro to get power of every kind, power in education, science, industry, politics, and high government. That kind of power will stand out, signaling so that other races and nations can see, and if they will not see, then feel. Man is not satisfied or moved by prayers or petitions, but every man is moved by that power of authority, which forces him to do even against his will. So power, power is what makes us go to work. Nobody really wants to go to work Monday through Friday, but that authority makes us go to work. Whereas on Sundays, it's like, I guess some people could say there's an authority that forces them to go to church. But it's, the power that our employers have is pretty significant. Any questions, comments thus far? Let me see what time it is. Okay. We go for about 30 more minutes. I'm looking for another topic. Okay, so traitors. I got that one highlighted for some reason. Let me see. Let's do race assimilation first. That's on page 26, and then we'll go to 29 traitors. Race assimilation. Some Negro leaders have advanced the belief that in another few years, the white people will make up their minds to assimilate their Black populations, thereby sinking all racial prejudice in the welcoming of the Black race into the social companionship of the white. Such leaders further believe that by amalgamation of Black and white, a new type will spring up, and that type will become the American and West Indian of the future. This belief is preposterous. I believe that white men should be white, yellow men should be yellow, and Black men should be Black in the great panorama of races until each and every race, by its own initiative, lifts itself up to the common standard of humanity, as to compel the respect and appreciation of all, and to make it possible for each one to stretch out the hand of welcome without being able to be prejudiced against the other because of an inferior and unfortunate condition. The white man of America will not, to any organized extent, assimilate the Negro, because in doing so, he feels that he will be committing racial suicide. This he is not prepared to do. It is true he illegitimately carries on a system of assimilation, but such assimilation as practice is one that he is not prepared to do because is one that he is not prepared to support because he becomes prejudiced against his own offspring. If that offspring is the product of the black and white, hence to the white man, the question of racial differences is eternal. So long as Negroes occupy an inferior position among the races and nations of the world, just so long will others be prejudiced against them, because it will be profitable for them to keep up their system of superiority. But when the Negro, by his own initiative, lifts himself from his low state to the highest human standard, he will be in position to stop begging and praying and demand a place that no individual race or nation will be able to deny him. So that's race assimilation. Any questions, comments on race assimilation? Okay. Man, 28. All right. Traitors is coming up. I like Traitors. Before we go to Traitors, there's a section called The Function of Man on page 28. God placed man on earth as Lord of creation. The elements, all nature, are at his command. It is for him to harness them, subdue them, and use them. Edison harnessed electricity. Today, the world reflects the brilliancy of his grand illumination. Stevenson, through experiments, has given us the use of the steam engine, and today the railroad train flies across the country at a speed of 60 miles an hour. Marconi conquered the currents of the air, and today we have wireless telegraphy that flashes news across the continents with a rapidity never yet known to man. All this reveals to us that man is supreme Lord of creation, that in man lies the power of mastery, a mastery of self, a mastery of all things created, bowing only to the Almighty Architect in those things that are spiritual and those things that are divine. So yeah, we talk about this in Course of African Philosophy, the function of man, the purpose of man, and man rising to, the purpose of his creation as, let me see, what is the words that they use? As Lord of creation, basically, Lord of all things created here on earth. Questions, comments on function of man? All right. So this one's I highlighted this one. I haven't read it in a while, so I don't remember exactly what it's going to say, but this section is called Traitors. So traitors to the race. In the fight to reach the top, the oppressed have always been encumbered by the traitors of their own race, made up of those of little faith and those who are generally susceptible to bribery for the selling out of the rights of their own people. As Negroes, we are not entirely free from such an encumbrance. To be outspoken, I believe we are more encumbered in this way than any other race in the world, because of the lack of training and preparation for fitting us for our place in the world among nations and races. The traitor of other races is generally confined to the mediocre or irresponsible individual, but unfortunately, the traitors among the Negro race are generally found to be among the men highest placed in education in society, the fellows who call themselves leaders. For us to examine ourselves thoroughly as a people, we will find that we have more traitors than leaders, because nearly everyone who essays to lead the race at this time does so by first establishing himself as the pet of some philanthropist or another race to whom he will go and debase his race in the worst form, humiliate his own manhood, and thereby win the sympathy of the quote unquote great benefactor, who will dictate to him what he should do in the leadership of the Negro race. It is generally, quote, you must go out and teach your people to be meek and humble. Tell them to be good servants, loyal and obedient to their masters. If you will teach them such a doctrine, you can always depend on me to give you a $1,000 a year or $5,000 a year for the support of yourself, the newspaper, or the institution you represent. I will always recommend you to my friends as a good fellow who is all right, end quote. With this advice and prospect of patronage, the average Negro leader goes out to lead the unfortunate mass. These leaders tell us how good Mr. So-and-so is, how many good friends we have in the opposite race, and if we leave everything to them, all will work out. This is the kind of leadership that we have been having for the last 50 years. It is nothing else but treachery and treason of the worst kind. The man who will compromise the attitude of his country is a traitor. And even so, the man who will compromise the rights of his race can be classified in no other way than that of a traitor. Not until we settle down as 400 million people and let not until we settle down as 400 million people and let the men who have placed themselves in the lead of us realize that we are disgusted and dissatisfied and that we shall have a leadership of our own and stick by it when we get it, we will be able to lift ourselves from this mire of degradation to the heights of prosperity, human liberty, and appreciation, human appreciation. So we'll always have traitors. Garvey felt that our race, we have more traitors than any other race due to the conditions that we've been put in. But he also said you can find these traitors because they will be self-proclaimed leaders, usually funded by a philanthropist. And they preach a form of pacifism and acceptance. Okay, let's see. Cause of wars. I'm trying to see what would be relevant. Great ideals, no nationality. I like that one. I'm gonna touch on that one. Purpose of creation. I felt like we just did that.
So what you doing? Skipping around or you?
Yes, I'm skipping around. I'm in it's still in volume 1. I just read some stuff from chapter 2, government, poverty, power, the function of man, and traitors.
Okay.
So I was looking at some stuff in chapter 3. I'm trying to, looking at what's going on and pull from what relates, considering current events and things. Earth. Universal unrest in 1922. Let's see about that one. 32. That could apply. Yeah, but if there's anything or section that you want to touch on specifically, let me know. I was just jumping around, didn't really have an agenda, didn't do a lot of preparation for tonight. Hopefully, next study group I'll have a little more.
Are you marking what you're reading?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I'll put a little mark on them. Okay. Universal unrest in 1922. So almost 100 years ago. Well, yeah, we in 2022 now. Yeah, so 100 years ago. The human race is universally disturbed because of the many injustices inflicted upon the masses by the dominant powers. The privileged classes have for centuries dominated the will of the masses, and as it would appear, have ground out of the toiling millions the last drop of sweat. These millions are now in rebellion. They are striking everywhere in England, France, Germany, America, and other parts of the world. Those who are not on strike are shaking their fists in bloody revolution as a protest against the industrial and political systems of the day. In this big noise for world readjustment in the affairs of the human race, 400 million Negroes cry out for better conditions and for justice. We haven't really gotten into a full liberation summer in 2022, not like it was in 2020, but from what I hear, grassroots groups are trying to increase the level of energy towards revolution. So that is Universal Unrest, 1922. I'm gonna go to Great Ideals, No Nationality, page 36. Great ideas know no nationality. My enemies in America have done much to hold me up to public contempt and ridicule, but have failed. They believe that the only resort is to stir up national prejudice against me and that I was not born within the borders of the United States of America. I am not in the least concerned about such a propaganda because I have traveled the length and breadth of America, and I have discovered that among the 15 million of my race, only those who have exploited and live off the ignorance of the masses are concerned with where I was born. The masses of the people are looking for leadership. They desire sincere, honest guidance in racial affairs. As proof of this, I may mention that the largest number of members in the Universal Negro Improvement Association, of which I am President General, are to be found in America and are native-born Americans. I know these people so well, and I love them so well that I would not for 1 minute think that they would fall for such an insidious propaganda. All intelligent people know that one's nationality has nothing to do with great ideals and great principles. If it is because I am a Jamaican, the Negro should not accept the principles of race rights and liberty or the ideal of a free and independent race, then you may well say that because Jesus was a Nazarene, the outside world should not accept his doctrine of Christianity because he was a quote unquote alien. Because Martin Luther was born in Germany, the world should not accept the doctrine of Protestantism. Because Alexander Hamilton and Lafayette were not born in America, Americans should not accept and appreciate the benefits they bestowed upon the nation. Because Marconi was an Italian, we of the New World should not make use of wireless telegraphy. Again, I say great principles, great ideals, no nationality. I know no national boundary where the Negro is concerned. The whole world is my province until Africa is free. Okay. I kind of want to touch on purpose of creation and see how it differs from the other essay. Let's see, what one was it? Purpose of creation. The function of man was the name of it on page 28. The man or woman who has no confidence in self is an unfortunate being and is really a misfit in creation. God Almighty created each and every one of us for a place in the world, and for the least of us to think that we were created only to be what we are and not what we can make ourselves is to impute an improper motive to the Creator for creating us. God Almighty created us to be free. That the Negro race became a race of slaves was not the fault of God Almighty, the divine master. It was the fault of the race. Sloth, neglect, indifference caused us to be slaves. Confidence, conviction, action will cause us to be free men today. Okay. Purity of race. Next one. I believe in a pure Black race, just as how all self-respecting whites believe in a pure white race, as far as that can be. I'm conscious of the fact that slavery brought upon us the curse of many colors within the Negro race, but that is no reason why we of ourselves should perpetuate the evil. Hence, instead of encouraging a wholesale bastardy in the race, we feel that we should now set out to create a race type and standard of our own, which could not in the future be stigmatized by bastardy, but could be recognized and respected as the true race type anteceding even our own time. Okay, I want to jump to chapter 5 to grab to touch on what Amy Jocks Garvey stated were some of what she felt his best speeches. It's probably Emancipation speech and Convention speech. Check. 10 after, okay, 20 minutes. So let me go to Emancipation speech on page 79. Why did it say 79? Oh, okay. 2 sections. Ooh, this thing long. That's all right. All right. This one's pretty good too. January 1st, 1922. So again, 100 years ago. This is Emancipation speech delivered on Emancipation Day at Liberty Hall, New York City, New York. So just a note, we are supposed to be recognizing January 1st as Emancipation Day. Maybe we can do that this coming year. But looking at the records and the history, our people or the UNIA at least recognize January 1st as Emancipation Day. Okay. Some water. All right. 59 years ago, Abraham Lincoln, so 159 years ago today, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation declaring 4 million Negroes in this country free. Several years prior to that, Queen Victoria of England signed the Emancipation Proclamation that set at liberty hundreds of thousands of West Indian Negro slaves. West Indian Negroes celebrate their emancipation on the first day of August of every year. The American Negro celebrates their emancipation on the first day of January every year. Tonight, we are here to celebrate the emancipation of the slaves in this country. So, okay, that's where it comes from. We are the descendants of the men and women who suffered in this country for 250 years under that barbarous and brutal institution known as slavery. You have not lost trace of your history. You who have not lost trace of your history will recall the fact that over 300 years ago, your forebears were taken from the great continent of Africa and brought here for the purpose of using them as slaves. Without mercy, without any sympathy, they worked our forebears. They suffered, they bled, they died, but with their suffering, with their blood, which they shed in their death, they had a hope that one day their posterity would be free. And we are assembled here tonight as children of their hope. I trust each and every one of you, therefore, will realize that you have a duty which is incumbent upon you, a duty that you must perform because our forebears who suffered, who bled, who died, had hopes that are not yet completely realized. They hoped that we as their children would be free, but they also hoped that their country from whence they came would also be free to their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren at some future time. It is for freedom that the country, the motherland of ours, that 4.5 million Negroes, as members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, are laboring today. This race of ours gave civilization, gave art, gave science, gave literature to the world. But it has been the way with races and nations. The one race stands out prominently in the one century or in the one age. And in another century or age, it passes off the stage of action and another race takes its place. The Negro once occupied a high position in the world scientifically, artistically, and commercially. But in the balancing of the great scale of evolution, we lost our place, and someone other than ourselves occupies the stand we once held. God never intended that man should enslave his fellow, and the price of such a sin or such a violation of heaven's law must be paid by everyone. As for me, because of the blessed past, because of the history that I know, so long as there is within me the breath of life and the Spirit of God, I shall struggle on and urge others of our race to struggle on and see that justice is done to the Black peoples of the world. Yes, we appreciate the sorrows of the past, and we are going to work in the present that the sorrows of our generation shall not be perpetuated in the future. On the contrary, we shall strive that by our labors, succeeding generations of our own shall call us blessed, even as we call the generation of the past blessed today. And they indeed were blessed. They were blessed with a patience not yet known to man, a patience that enabled them to endure the tortures and sufferings of slavery for 250 years. Why? Why? Was it because they loved slavery so? No. It was because they loved this generation more. Isn't it wonderful? Transcendent. What then are you doing to show your appreciation of this love? What gratitude are you going to manifest in the return for what they have done for you? As for me, knowing the sufferings of my forefathers, I shall give back to Africa that liberty that she once enjoyed hundreds of years ago, before her own sons and daughters were taken from her shores and brought in chains to this Western world. No better gift can I give than in honor of the memory of the love of my foreparents for me, and in gratitude of the sufferings they endured that I might be free. No grander gift can I bear to the sacred memory of the generation past than a free and redeemed Africa, a monument for all eternity, for all times. As by action of the world, as by the conduct of all races and nations, it is apparent that not one of them has the sense of justice, the sense of love, the sense of equity, the sense of charity that will make them happy and make God satisfied. It is apparent that it is left to the Negro to play such a part in human affairs. When we look to the Anglo-Saxon, we see him full of greed, avarice, no mercy, no love, no charity. We go from the white man to the yellow man, and we see the same unenviable characteristics in the Japanese. Therefore, we must believe that the psalmist had great hopes of this race of ours when he prophesies, quote unquote, princes shall come out of Egypt, and Ethiopia shall stretch forth her hands unto God, end quote. If humanity is regarded as made up of the children of God and God loves all humanity, we all know that, then God will be more pleased with the race that protects all humanity than with the race that outrages the children of God. And so tonight we celebrate this anniversary of our emancipation. We do it not with regret. On the contrary, we do it with an abiding confidence, a hope, a faith in ourselves and in our God. And the faith that we have is a faith that will ultimately take us back to the ancient place, the ancient position that we once occupied when Ethiopia was in her glory. So that's the Emancipation Speech from 1922, January 1st, 1922. Any questions, comments, anything on that? 18 after. The resurrection of the Negro. Ooh. Dang. Resurrection of the Negro seems pretty good. It's kind of long. That'll probably be the last thing that we can do. The other one was Convention Speech, 93, page 93. Speech delivered at Second International Convention. Yeah, that one ain't okay. So we'll end with, wow. Man, we right on time. So this is the resurrection of the Negro. This speech was given on Easter Sunday sermon delivered at Liberty Hall, New York, April 16th, 1922. So 100 years and a couple months. 100 years and a couple months. This speech was given by Marcus Garvey. Okay, the resurrection of the Negro. The Lord is risen. A little over 1900 years ago, a man came to this world called Jesus. He was sent here for the propagation of a cause, that of saving fallen humanity. When he came, the world refused to hear him. The world rejected him. The world persecuted him. Men crucified him. A couple days ago, he was nailed to the cross of Calvary. He died. He was buried. Today, he is risen. Risen, the spiritual leader of creation, risen as the first fruit of them that slept. Today, the crucified Lord, that crucified Christ, sees the affairs of man from his own spiritual throne on high. After hundreds of years have rolled by, the doctrine he taught has become the accepted religion of hundreds of millions of human beings. He in his resurrection triumphed over death and the grave. He, by his resurrection, convinced humanity that his cause was spiritual. The world felt the truth about Jesus too late to have accepted his doctrine in his lifetime. But what was done to Jesus in his lifetime is just what is done to all reformers and reform movements. He came to change the spiritual attitude of man toward his brother. That was regarded in his day as an irregularity, even as it is regarded today. The one who attempts to bring about changes in order of human society becomes a dangerous impostor upon society and to those who control the systems of the day. The desire to enslave others. It has been an historic attitude of man to keep his brother in slavery, in subjection for the purpose of exploitation. When Jesus came, the privileged were taking advantage of the unfortunate masses because the teachings of Jesus sought to equalize the spiritual and even the temporal rights of man. Those who held authority, sway, and dominion sought his liberty by persecution, sought his life by death. He was called to yield up that life for the cause he loved because he was indeed a true reformer. But going back to what Garvey said a while ago, let me get it correctly. I think it's men who are in earnest, don't have fear or have no fear of consequences. Leadership. Men who are in earnest are not afraid of consequences. So I think that goes back to his Jesus message, his Christ message. The example set by Christ. The example set by our Lord and Master 1900 years ago is but the example that every reformer must make up his own mind to follow if we are indeed to serve those to whom we minister. Service to humanity means sacrifice. That has been demonstrated by our blessed Lord and Redeemer, whose resurrection we commemorate this day. As Christ triumphed nearly 2,000 years ago over death and the grave, as he was risen from the dead, so do I hope that 400 million Negroes of today will triumph over the slavishness of the past, intellectually, physically, morally, and even religiously, that on this anniversary of our risen Lord, we ourselves will be risen from the slumber of the ages, risen in thought to the higher ideals, to a loftier purpose, to a truer conception of life. The hope of the UNIA. It is the hope of the Universal Negro Improvement Association that the 400 million Negroes of the world will get to realize that we are about to live a new life, a risen life, a life of knowing ourselves. How many of us know ourselves? How many of us understand ourselves? The major number of us for ages have failed to recognize in ourselves the absolute masters of our own destiny, the absolute directors and creators of our own fate. Today, as we think of our risen Lord, we may not also think of the life he gave to us, the life that made us his instruments, his children, the life that he gave to us to make us possessors of the land that he himself created through his Father. How many of us can reach out to the higher life, that higher purpose, that creative world that says to you, you are a man, a sovereign, a Lord of the creation. On this beautiful spring day, may we not realize that God made nature for us. God has given it to us as our province, our dominion. May we not realize that God has created no superior being to us in this world but himself. May we not know that we are the true lords and creators of our own fate and of our own physical destiny. The work of the Universal Negro Improvement Association for the past 4.5 years has been that of guiding us to realize that there should be resurrection in us. And if at no other time, I trust that at this Easter tide, we will realize that there is a great need for the resurrection, a resurrection from the lethargy of the past, the sleep of the past, from that feeling that made us accept the idea and opinion that God intended that we should occupy an inferior place in the world. couple more sections. Yeah, just bear with me. No superiority or inferiority. Men and women of Liberty Hall, men and women of my race, do you know that the God we love, the God we adore, the God who sent his son to this world nearly 2,000 years ago, never created an inferior man? The God we love, the God we worship and adore, has created man in his own image, equal in every aspect, whosoever he may be, wheresoever he may be. Let him be white, let him be yellow, let him be red, let him be black. God has created him the equal of his brother. He is such a loving God. He is such a merciful God. He is such a God that is no respecter of persons, that he would not, in his great love, create a superior race and an inferior one. The God that you worship is a God that expects you to be the equal of other men. The God that I adore is such a God, and he could be no other. Some of us seem to accept the fatalist position, the fatalist attitude that God accorded to us a certain position and condition, and therefore there's no need trying to be otherwise. The moment you accept such an attitude, the moment you accept such an opinion, the moment you harbor such an idea, you hurl an insult at the great God who created you, because you question him for his love. Because you question him for his love, you question him for his mercy. God has created man and has placed him in this world as the Lord of creation, as the sovereign of everything that you see. Let it be land, let it be sea, let it be lakes, rivers, and everything therein. All that you see in creation, all that you see in the world was created by God for use of man, and your 400 million black souls have as much right to your possession in this world as any other races. Created in the image of the same God, we have the same common rights. And today I trust that there will be a spiritual and material resurrection among Negroes everywhere, that you will lift yourselves from the doubts of the past, that you will lift yourselves from the slumbers of the past, that you will lift yourselves from the lethargy of the past and strike out in this new life, in the resurrected life, to see things as they are. See life as others see it. The Universal Negro Improvement Association desires that the 400 million Negroes of our race see life as other races see it. The great white race sees life in the attitude of sovereignty. The great yellow race sees life in a similar way. And that is to say that man, let him be white or yellow, sees that he is master and owner and possessor of everything that God has created in this world and given to us as nature. And that is why, by knowing himself, by understanding himself, and by understanding his God, man has gone throughout the length and breadth of this world, conquering the very elements, harnessing nature, and making a servant of everything that God placed within his reach. As he has done that for thousands of years, pleasing God and justifying his existence, so we are appealing to the members of our race to do that now, in this risen life. And if you have never made up your minds before, I trust on this Easter Sunday, you will do so. A couple more sections, probably be like 5 minutes past 9:30 when we finish. Masters of our own destiny. I repeat that God created you masters of your own destiny, masters of your own fate, and you can pay no higher tribute to your divine master than function as man as he created you. The highest compliment we can pay to our creator, the highest respect we can pay to our risen Lord and Savior is that of feeling that he has created us as his masterpiece, his perfect instruments of his own existence, because in us is reflected the very being of God. When it is said that we are created in his own image, we ourselves reflect his greatness. We ourselves reflect the part of God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Ghost. And when we allow ourselves to be subjected and create others, as our superior, we hurl an insult at our creator who made us in the fullness of ourselves. I trust that you will live today as to realize that you are masters of your own destiny, masters of your own fate. If there's anything you want in this world, it is for you to strike out with confidence and faith in self and reach for it, because God has created it for you, for your happiness, wheresoever you may find it in nature. Nature is bountiful, nature is resourceful, and nature is willing to obey the command of man. Man, the sovereign Lord, man who is supposed to hold dominion and take possession of this great world of ours. The difference between strong and weak races. The difference between strong and weak races is that the strong races seem to know themselves, seem to discover themselves, seem to realize and know fully that there is but a link between them and the Creator, that above them there is no other but God, and anything that bears human form is but their equal in standing, and to that form there should be no obeisance. There should be no regard for superiority. Because of that feeling, they have been able to hold their own in this world. They have been able to take care of the situation as it confronts them in nature. But because of our lack of faith and confidence in ourselves, we have caused others created in a like image to ourselves to take advantage of us for hundreds of years. For hundreds of years, we have been the footstool of other races and nations of the earth simply because we have failed to realize, to recognize, and know ourselves as other men have known themselves and felt that there's nothing in the world that is above them except the influence of God. The understanding that others have gotten out of life, is the same understanding that 400 million Negroes must get out of this existence of ours. I pray that a new inspiration will come to us as a race, that we will think of nature as our servant, that we will think of man as our partner through life, and go through the length and breadth of the world, achieving and doing as other men and other nations, as other nations and other races. So that completes the reading for this evening. I'll open it up. Any questions, comments, and anything that was discussed? Observations?
It's just always when I listen to read Garvey's speeches, it just seemed like, history just keeps repeating itself. You know what I'm saying? Like I can see what he's talking about then, and I can place it with today. And I think that's one of the greatest things about his speeches, and even Amy Garvey, even what she started off saying can be related to now about the bleaching and stuff. I didn't know they were doing it back then.
Oh yeah. Garvey talked about that in one of his famous speeches. Like they said, are bleaching our skin, and we shouldn't, not protecting our women. But he was saying, like, these are things that we did in times of slavery, but now that we're not in slavery, we shouldn't be still doing those type of things. But yeah, the consistency of messaging, not only through Garvey's life, when I look at some of his early readings, like this 1922, and I compare that to 1937, when he started to do the course of African philosophy, the themes are the same. The call for us to meet the criteria of our creation, be what God intended for us to be, and God never intended for us to be slaves. That's a common theme that Garvey repeats throughout his life. But yeah, the consistency of messaging and the fact that it's a little frustrating for me, honestly, the fact that these things are still happening, and these things, it's good that it's still true, but it's like we've been talking about the same stuff for 100 years now, and we're not really serious about making progress or about making changes so that 100 years from now, things would be different, and our children can say what we did to kind of make things different, so that we're not still talking about the same stuff. Only other thing that I had in this last section, Garvey, he emphasizes a lot about equality of man, and I agree. But I do know our Hebrew Israelite brothers, They try to say, God, and they use the Bible to back it up, but they say, God doesn't treat everybody equally, and God had a select group of individuals that he basically made superior to the others. But those would be the Israelites. But that's the only thing that that's the only thing that I picked up based on what Garvey was stating and what I've heard in modern time. Any other questions, comments? It is, I think, about 5 minutes. 6 minutes past 9:30. So I don't want to hold everybody too long. Just to recap. Try to recap. We read the second introduction, because there's 2 introductions, but we read the second introduction, and we read the preface from Amy Jocks Garvey. We also read, I think I read government. Yeah, we read government on page 19. We read poverty, page 21. We read power, page 21. Function of man, page 28. Traitors, page 29. Universal Unrest in 1922 on page 32. Great Ideals, No Nationality, page 36. And then we jumped to chapter 5, read the Emancipation Speech on page 79, and Easter Sermon is what we just read on page 87. Yeah, we will develop our study plan for this course or for this book. In my experience, we've always talked about reading this text, but we've never really gotten around to it. So as far as a format, we didn't really have a format, and I mean, we could just read it from front to back, but I don't know. We'll get through it. But just to recap on what we have completed tonight, and everything that we read tonight comes from volume 1 of Message, Philosophy and Opinions. So there's a volume 2 as well. We didn't really touch on any of that stuff tonight. All right. But if there aren't any questions or comments, well, last call, questions, comments before we move to close. Okay. All right. I won't hold everybody here longer than we need to be. It's 9:30. It's late on a weekday. So we'll go ahead and close out and get ready for Juneteenth this weekend. So if you could come off mute and repeat after me. We'll close out. One God.
One God.
One aim.
One aim.
One destiny.
One destiny.
Africa for the Africans.
Africa for the Africans.
Those at home and those abroad.
Those at home, those abroad.
Race first, family. Go in peace, and
First.
thank everybody for calling in.
Race first.